if you had a license plate that ended with an even number, then you could get gas on even number days. You get gas on the 4th, the 6th, the 8th, and so on. And if you had an odd number at the end of your plate, you could only get gas on the odd number days. So it's kind of a rationing thing, just like we watched the bank run. And I don't know if you've been to the store lately, but I never knew that this would cause so much stress and tension, right? I did have an experience one time when I was on a motorcycle rally, and it was the end of the rally, and I'd gone into the restroom just before we were packing up, getting ready to leave. And I went in the restroom and sat down. And I looked, and lo and behold, this is what I found. Not this exact one, but just like it. And it did produce a little bit of stress, just saying. It caused a bit of stress. And a friend of mine happened to be at that rally, Rick, and I don't know what I said, but he picked up on what was happening. He started chuckling. He says, "Give me a minute." And he ran off, and Rick, it so happens, he just happens to carry around some extra with him. So he kind of slid it to the door to me there and there. But who knew that this would cause so much stress? Just like the bank run, just like the gas lines. It's been kind of crazy lately. I have to say it's taken me a bit by surprise, because maybe some of you know, if you do, please share it with me, what toilet paper has to do with this kind of pneumonia kind of thing that's been going around. But people they're panicking, and they're going after whatever they can get a hold of. Keeping an eye on social media the last few days, it seems like the world is on fire. It just like it's all blowing up. In fact, I read online last night that Walmart has changed its hours. They're no longer 24 hours. They're closing 11 o'clock at night because of just everything that's going on. Whether it's all to conserve their labor force, or because they don't have the supplies, or they don't want to deal with the crowds overnight. Maybe they want a chance to be able to unload the trucks and get the stuff on the shelf, and without people in the store. Maybe that's what it's about. What I do know is that more knowledge doesn't seem to be helping. The fact is, there's so many conflicting ideas out there about exactly what this coronavirus entails, and how it's made up, and the impacts that it has on people. I'm getting lots and lots of different kinds of information. With all of the knowledge that we have been given, we still don't have the answers to life's questions. We still are found waiting and wondering what to do next, how to respond. We still have to practice patience with one another, because we're still here, and life is still messy, and people are imperfect. We are imperfect. Every one of us. And we find ourselves in this place of wondering what to do next, and we end up finding that we indeed are in need of patience. Just as a reminder of how this series started, James is writing this letter to a group of believers kind of out and scattered, and he writes, "Consider it joy. Consider it joy. Consider it joy. Whenever you face trials of many kinds." This would fit into that, wouldn't it? This is kind of a trial. It definitely is a trial. He says, "Consider it joy when you face trials of many kinds, knowing that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And perseverance, when it's complete, will bring about maturity and completion in our lives." Could he have meant this? Could he have meant the kind of trials and the kind of stuff that we're walking through now? I read a post the other day by a Costco worker. A Costco worker was getting on and pleading for people to be patient and to be kind to one another. He talked about the lines. He talked about the people with the short tempers. He talked about sometimes the verbal fights and sometimes the physical fights. I said, the way we're responding is not representing us well as people. Having patience is definitely one of my trials. I can think of when the kids were still at home, when our kids were teenagers and they were still living at the house. I can remember my struggle with patience when they were out past their curfew. Supposed to be home by 10 o'clock, and as I told my daughter and my son more than once, 10 o'clock means 10 o'clock. It doesn't mean 10:01 or 10:02 or 10:03, because if I'd have meant 10:03, I would have said 10:03. I want you home at 10. And when your kids don't show up, you realize that it causes anxiety. You're worried about them. What could be going wrong? Anything could be happening. They could have an accident. They could have been stranded someplace. A parent's mind it races in about 1,000 different directions. I just want you guys to know it does. And so it was a struggle to be patient during those times. And I'm not good at waiting. I'm not good at waiting in line, whether it's a Safeway on a Sunday evening at 7:30. That's not a place for me to be on a Sunday evening at a Safeway. They usually only have one line open at that time. And people are lined up clear down past the bakery and up by the meat. It's just nuts. I look at what I came in for. I said, do I really need this that bad? Patience is not my strong suit. Or whether I'm waiting for a call, or whether I'm waiting for an answer. You've been waiting on an answer? It could be about a loan. It could be about a mortgage. It could be from a doctor. It could be from the furniture guy who's supposed to call you about coming out and looking at your couch, and you're waiting, and one day turns into another day. There's a lot of different things that we wait on, and being patient sometimes stretches us. It could be to find out whether the cancer is malignant or whether it's benign. It could be to find out whether we indeed have diabetes, and if we do, is it type 1 or is it type 2? Will I need surgery? Well, cancer, coronavirus, or being patient with people behaving badly can be a challenge to us. And as I have said, James is up front with us about life, as was Jesus. Jesus told us we would have trouble in life, that things won't just always go smoothly. There's no express lane for believers. There's no fast pass around all the stuff and to where everything just sails. I don't know if Gus has this, but some travelers that travel quite often, they can get a special kind of security clearance, and then when they go to the airport, they can show that and skip around all of the TSA security stuff and go right to the head of the line. We kind of want that as believers. I don't know about you, but I'm not crazy about when things go wrong, and I'm a believer. The Lord's supposed to have His hand on me. Everything's supposed to go smooth, and that's how I operate, and I could say that's how I roll. I don't know about you, but I think we want that, don't we? We kind of want things to go smoothly and go well. And James implores us to be patient. He said things are going to be tough in this world, and he lays out a number. We've looked at several different trials that James lists in this letter, different ways that we find. And I'm finding it interesting. I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like God has this way of pulling things together to make sense in our life. Personally in our lives, God has this way of helping us to organize, and He brings things at the right timing. And then as I've been looking through this letter to James, and as we've been going through this together, it seems like God has been leading us up to this point about what's going on in our culture. If you've been here for the messages, I'm trusting that you have gotten that impression as well. Graham was just saying last Friday, he said, I find it interesting. We were just studying 2 weeks ago about how the fact that many times our plans, they were well-intentioned, but all of a sudden they go awry. And all the plans that we had made, they seemed not to make a difference. And now as everything's happening, look at all the people who made plans over the last couple of weeks. I can't help but see how people's plans have changed. People had planned to attend some kind of a workshop or a competition. The NCAA tournament got canceled. Baseball got canceled. That's just crazy. Well, suspended anyway. They put it off, another 6 weeks. Schools are being suspended for anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. Washington, they're not going back to school until the 24th of April. And parents are now having to make, like backup plans for what to do with their kids. If both parents are working, what do we do? I have a daughter who lives and works over in Seattle, and she sent me a text last week, says, well, not only did they cancel my classes, but she works for a theater company, and she works front of the house, and she says they've sent us all home, and we don't have any work for the next 6 weeks. She doesn't have school. She doesn't have work. All the plans that we make, all of a sudden, they fall through the cracks, and we're left trying to figure out what to do. Maybe you haven't been affected by this personally, but honestly, millions of people have. It's bigger than we can imagine. And economically, this has got to run into the trillions. When you're talking about all of the major sporting events that have been canceled and all of the stadiums that are empty, I was looking online the other day trying to find out if the Players' Championship, which is a golfing tournament and may not be on your radar, but it's a big event with a $15 million purse. And there's a golf course that just spent millions of dollars preparing for this event and bringing in volunteers or flying in from all over the country to help with this event. And players who've been trying to make sure that they peak at the right time and they're ready for this tournament, and it just gets canceled. I think that God still has a way of arranging the material that we have, that we're studying, and He has a way of bringing us to a point where we are ready because we've heard what He has shared with us. And as we've gone through James, there have been so much that has been leading up to this. And this morning we continue. And if you have your Bibles, if you'd go ahead and turn to James 5, verses 7. And let me go ahead and read a few verses and find out what God has to say to us this morning. In verse 7, he says, "Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and the spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near." James refers back to those who treat us badly when he says, "Be patient, therefore." He's talking about what we had just talked about last week, and he talked about the rich people who take advantage of us, those people who are in a position over us, and they tend to be oppressive. I think of the Costco shoppers hoarding the toilet paper. I read online the other night about somebody who was taking a U-Haul van, and they were driving all over their state, and they were picking up at some of the dollar stores and whatnot, and picking up the little hand sanitizers and toilet paper, and they were getting all this stuff and filling their pickup truck and their trailer. They were buying everything that was on the shelf, and they were going home and then posting this on Amazon for 10 times the price. Really? That's the response? There are people in need, and our response is to do our very best to make as much money off them as we can? To be patient. How long? Until the Lord's coming. That's what it says. I like to tell you, until next week, but it says until the Lord's coming, be patient. In other words, always be patient. It should characterize us. So how are we supposed to practice patience? The same way the farmer does. I don't know, anybody have an experience with farming? It says that the farmer waits for the rains to come, for the Lord to do His work. I mean, we go out and we sow the seed and we prepare the fields, but then we have to wait on God. We have to trust that God is at work. We have to believe that God is on the job even when we can't see Him. Is that true today? With all the stuff that's going on, can we still trust God? Can we be patient and think God is going to bring what He needs to bring to us? We do our part and God does His part. Because the Lord is near. Because the Lord is near. God is near us. Jesus repeats that phrase often in the Gospels as we watch Him speaking to the crowds. The fact is, there's nothing that you're going through and that I'm not going through that God is not aware of, that He doesn't see. God watches us and He sees us and He knows what it is that we struggle with. And as I say, He's working even when you don't see it. God's timing is perfect. As I talk about being patient, I have to say that one of the areas in which I struggle with patience the most is with myself. I don't know if you can share that. I don't know if that's something that you also struggle with, but how oftentimes I found myself really disappointed in myself in the way that I've acted. And I think I'm supposed to be beyond that. I'm supposed to be past that. I'm supposed to be acting differently. I'm supposed to be showing more grace. I'm supposed to be showing more of God's mercy and His love. So be patient always. Verse 9. Verse 9 says, "Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. For the judge is standing at the door." How are we supposed to demonstrate patience? Without grumbling. Consider it joy. Consider it joy when all of these things happen to us that we don't want in our lives. That's like crazy. Yeah, that's the kingdom of God. Because our life is so much bigger than this stuff that's getting in our way. Our life is so much bigger than the relationship issues that we have with one another that can happen as a part of life. And so don't grumble. Because grumbling reveals your attitude. And it reveals your confidence in God. I don't know about you, but I can be a grumbler. I can be a grumbler. Deb says, no, you're not. That's not how you are at all. You may recall when the Israelites were led out of Egypt, if you've read that story, where Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt, and it says that in almost at every phase, it says the people grumbled against God. They grumbled against Moses, and they grumbled against God. When they came to the Red Sea, they grumbled. When they got through the Red Sea and got to the other side, and they went to the foot of Mount Sinai, and Moses had gone up onto the mountain for 40 days, and the people grumbled. And then they started making their way across the wilderness, and they were hungry, and they grumbled, and God gave them manna from heaven. It was just a gift. He just put it out there. And He said, go out each day and collect some, and they grumbled. And then so they said, well, we want meat. Did you ever watch MASH? Anybody ever watch MASH? And there's a great scene in there where the guys are going through the mess, and Hawkeye, the guy puts some liver on his plate, and he says, I'm so sick of this. He said, I've had an ocean of fish and a river of liver. We want meat. We want meat. And they just made this big deal out of this. The Israelites said the same thing. We want meat. We're tired of this manna. We want meat. And so God caused, you remember? Quail. Caused quail to rain on the camp, feeding some maybe 2 or 3 million people. And all this quail came down day after day. And they grumbled. If you're a grumbler, you're a grumbler. And it seems like it's hard to get people past the grumbling. It's like no matter what I give you, there's always something to complain about. Do you know a grumbler? Ask the person next to you, am I a grumbler? Go ahead, ask. Does God know when we grumble? What does it say in verse 9b? It said, for the Lord is standing at the door. He's standing there. He's watching us. I'm not saying He's making a list and checking it twice, but God is watching us. God is near to us. And it says the judge is standing at the door. And he pays attention. What does Jesus say about our words? Do you recall that verse where he says, you will give an account for every careless word? I wonder if grumbling falls into the category of every careless word. It seems hard, but looking at what others have endured helps us in our perspective. So verse 10 says, brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's patience and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. For the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. There are times we can feel like we've gotten a raw deal. Now, right now, in terms of coronavirus, I mean, because that's what seems to be the hottest thing in the news right now, we're doing all right. Here we are in La Grande. I haven't heard any cases that have sprouted up in La Grande. We're in this small community on the east side of the mountains, and we're having church this morning. We just are. There are churches that are closed this morning, and they're having online services or what have you. But we're doing pretty well. But we can still feel like we've gotten a raw deal when we go to the store and we can't find chicken. We can't find frozen vegetables. We can't find toilet paper. We can't find hand sanitizer because people are hoarding things. And our patience can wear thin with people. It can. When I saw this article about this guy who has 77,000 bottles of hand sanitizer in his garage. Here's kind of the kickback to that. Amazon and eBay saw what he was doing and they cut him off. So now he's got like whatever 7,000 or 10,000 bottles in his garage, and there's nothing that he can do with it. We can feel like we've gotten a raw deal, as I say. But we have all seen somebody go through something more difficult than us. It's how we gain perspective. It's how we can attempt to be more patient than we are when we look around ourselves and we see that other people really have got it worse. My daughter has been anxiously waiting to hear from the Marine recruiter because my grandson is down there. And among other things, with this coronavirus, the Marines have canceled some of their graduation services. What they've done is they've gone ahead and graduated the guys in, behind closed doors, so to speak, inside, and given them, their certificate and congratulations and all that. And then they're going ahead and sending them home and then on to their next duty station, but without the ability for the family to gather and to participate in this graduation ceremony. And my daughter has been watching because they've canceled a couple of those, and they just informed her the other day that my grandson's class, which isn't until the end of April, so far is canceled. Unless it changes, they will not be able to have a regular graduation ceremony. And I know that my daughter is kind of, that's kind of a bummer. Feels like a raw deal. But what if she was to speak with the mother of a Marine or an Air Force or an Army soldier who had been killed in action? Not near as hard news to deal with, the fact that you can't go to graduation, than to find out that your son has died in combat. We can always find people who have it worse, and we can treat that flippantly. Oh yeah, I can always find somebody who has it worse, but the truth is, yes, you can. Yes, we can find other people who deal with a harder life than what we do. All the things that have been canceled. The Spokane motorcycle show has been canceled up in Spokane this weekend. Yeah, it's been canceled. They had, and the thing is, guys have been waiting for months. Of this part of the country, The riding season only runs up to maybe the middle of October, and pretty much guys are getting off the street because of the slick streets. And so the last 4 or 5 months, it's like, I can't wait, I can't wait, I can't wait. I know I got a motorcycle parked at my curb. Then I went out and took one ride and thinking, I think the snow's gone, so I'm going to go ahead and start riding. Well, all of these plans were made for this motorcycle show and all the vendors that were going to be there. We had a friend, Roger and Peggy had gone up and they'd camped at the fairgrounds waiting for the show because they were going to work the show. And they got canceled. And people are bummed out and they're disappointed. I wanted to get my bike fixed. And then my buddy Brad, who had to post both of his motorcycles on Facebook and on Craigslist and what have you, because he's got glioblastoma, brain cancer. I think I'd rather deal with the disappointment of not being able to go to the bike show than I would of finding out that I've got to sell my motorcycles because I've got brain cancer. We can be disappointed. It's understandable. And we can be impatient, and we get that. But we need to get a hold of ourselves and realize what's at stake and how blessed we actually are. The fact is we're just incredibly blessed. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy, even for Brad. Brad's not just waiting to the right part of the season or the end of the flu season when he can get up and go for a ride on his motorcycle. His motorcycle riding days are done. But Brad has a heart for God, and Brad knows that God loves him. And he knows that God is a God of grace and compassion and mercy. And he knows that there's more things, that things are more important in life than riding a motorcycle. At times it doesn't feel like that, but the truth is, of course, that it is. Verse 12, James writes, above all, brothers, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, or you will be condemned. Why? Because to do so is silly. It's just silly. For us to think that we have any control, to think that we can make some grand gesture, some vow, some commitment, and that it's set in stone it's not realistic. Do you know how much control you have over the things in your life or the people in your life? About that much. About that much. We function on a belief that we have control over our environment, that we have control over our family, that we have control over our business, and the fact is we have very little control at all. Schools are getting closed. Companies are sending workers home. Events are being canceled and church services are going online. Emergency rooms are overwhelmed, and on top of that, the whole world is out of toilet paper. How much control do we have? If nothing else, I'm telling you, this is a huge lesson for our American culture, our society, in terms of the way we live our life, because who would have thought 2 weeks ago that we would see what we're seeing in terms of the shutdown of our society? We live as though every next day is going to be just like it was yesterday. And the fact is, we go into work and they say, go home, there's nothing for you to do today. The kids go to school, and I know they're really disappointed to find out they're being sent home. I get that, but still. We have so little control. It's a time for humility. It's a time for humility. It's time to confess that we can no longer throw a fit and everything will just work out the way that we want to. That we have to be patient. And we have to learn to live with the situation the way it is and do our very best. Take this home. If we're going to have anything to offer to the people around us in the midst of this, it is this. that we function with patience, with hope, with faith, that God walks through this with us. Because the people in our life need to see that believers actually have something to offer them. That God walks with us. That He sends the rain when He chooses. And He sends the sun when He chooses. And He sends healing when He chooses. And He is a God of compassion and mercy. And we have to model that. We need to let people see that we're not panicking. I'm not about to get caught at Costco or anywhere else, filled with anxiety over having another roll of toilet paper or having another bottle of hand wash. My nephew is going through SEER training right now. My nephew, SERE, believe it is, what's the Survive, Evade, Resist, Escape. Survive, Evade, Resist, Escape. He's going through SEER training, survival training, because he's in the service and he's going to be going to do a highly risked mission. So he's been sent up to Fairchild in Spokane. And this weekend, right now, he's out in the mountains of North Idaho someplace, and he's completely on his own. Completely on his own. At least that's what he thinks. They take these guys up there and they drop them off in the middle of nowhere and they make them hike in, and they have to set up, there's really no real resources except what they carry, what they have allowed them to take with them. And he's got to stay there until Wednesday. That would require a bit of patience, wouldn't it? To be on your own from Friday to Wednesday with no real resources. He's got to make use of what he's been taught in terms of survival. He's got to find the food. He's got to forage. He's got to create some kind of shelter, and he's just got to survive and to do his best to do so in a way that he would not be able to be found. And I bet that there are times when he feels awfully lonely and isolated out there. What he doesn't know, because I don't think they tell him at all. We have a friend who is a SEER instructor. They don't tell him, but they have them under surveillance the whole time. They have instructors who are aware of where these guys are. They know what's going on. And so if anything was really to go sideways, they could step in, first aid or whatever, and if necessary. We're not much different. Because the fact is, many times we feel like we're walking through this stuff alone. Even with family around. Even with a spouse. Even with brothers and sisters. Even with fellow students and everything else. We can feel as though we're walking through this alone. We can feel very isolated. But the fact is, God says that He is always near. He is always at hand. And He was watching from the door. God calls us to be patient. For many reasons, for our own health, our own peace of mind, but also to model to the people around us. I can't stress it enough that during this time when it seems like so many people are operating their lives in a panic, they need to be able to look at people who follow Jesus and see that they're walking with confidence, that they're walking with trust in humility, knowing that God will walk us through this. Let's do that. Father God, thank you for the opportunity that we are meeting this morning. We recognize that so many people don't have that opportunity this morning, so thank you. I pray, Father, that you would take this word and you would break it and you would feed us, that you would sink it deep into our hearts, that there has been something that we can walk away with this morning. To know that we can trust you, to know that we can operate in patience, not because we have control, but because you have control and you love us. Father, help us to be the kind of people that draw people to you. We thank you for all that you're doing on our behalf that we cannot even see. But I pray, Father, that you would You would help us to open our eyes to see the many blessings that you've placed in our lives. We are rich in blessings. Help us to count those. In the name of your Son, Jesus, I pray. Amen.